Long before the rise of kingdoms and the memory of history, when the earth was still young and the stars sang their first songs across the void, a mystery began to unfold between heaven and earth. From the radiance of the divine came beings of light, majestic, ancient, and full of wisdom, appointed to watch over creation. They were called the Watchers, guardians of mankind and keepers of sacred knowledge. Their purpose was pure, born from the will of God Himself, to observe the growing world, guide its order, and protect humanity as it took its first trembling steps beneath the heavens. Yet within that duty would soon lie the seed of a great fall, one that would forever alter the balance between the celestial and the mortal. Their presence upon the earth was like dawn breaking over the mountains, brilliant, awe-inspiring, and full of promise. The Watchers stood as bridges between the realms, their eyes seeing both the divine and the earthly, their understanding vast beyond human thought. They walked unseen among men, watching them build, love, and strive. In their gaze, humanity was not weak but wondrous, a reflection of the Creator's own image made in dust and spirit. The angels marveled at mankind's ability to feel, to choose, to create from nothing but faith and hope. What they saw awakened admiration, and in that admiration began the faintest tremor of desire, a longing not for rebellion, but for closeness to that mysterious spark that humans carried within. From admiration grew fascination. The Watchers, though bound by heavenly command, could not turn away from what they observed. They saw beauty not only in creation, but in the human heart itself. They began to yearn to understand it, to know what it meant to live and love, to suffer and rejoice as mortals did. Their wings, radiant and untainted, trembled beneath that yearning. What began as duty slowly became temptation, for even beings of light are not immune to the pull of wonder. The boundary between heaven and earth that once seemed vast began to blur, and the Watchers found themselves caught between obedience and curiosity. Heaven, in its perfection, remained silent. The divine order does not rush to judgment. It allows every heart, even an angel's, to reveal its true intent. The silence of God was not absence, it was mercy, a pause before the storm. Yet as the Watchers continued to gaze upon the world, their thoughts deepened into longing. The beauty of the earth drew them like the light of dawn draws the eye, and within their hearts the whisper of desire grew louder than the voice of obedience. They who had once stood firm as pillars of divine will began to lean toward the world below, unaware that each step of fascination brought them closer to a fall that would echo through eternity. Mount Hermon would one day become the witness of their choice. There, beneath the endless sky, they would make a vow that would forever separate them from the glory they once knew. But before that day came, the heavens still shone in peace. The earth still thrived in innocence. The Watchers stood poised between two destinies, their eyes reflecting both the light of heaven and the shadow that was forming beneath it. They did not yet know that their story would become one of the most haunting in the history of creation, a story of beauty, temptation, and justice that would shape the spiritual fate of the world. If stories like this awaken your curiosity and move your spirit, make sure to subscribe to this channel, give this video a like, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Every voice matters, and your support helps bring more journeys like this one to light. Stay with us as we continue unveiling the mysteries that lie between heaven and earth. High above the clouds, beyond the veil of mortal sight, the Watchers gathered in council, their voices like the sound of distant storms. The air was thick with uncertainty, for a choice was being born among them, a choice that would defy the very essence of heaven's decree. Semyaza, their leader, spoke with conviction that rippled through the ranks of his brothers. He spoke of love and freedom, of the beauty that lay below, and of the longing that stirred within their hearts. His words were both bold and perilous, wrapped in the music of persuasion. What began as mere wonder had grown into rebellion masked as purpose. Semyaza reminded them that they had watched mankind struggle in ignorance, that they possessed knowledge that could lift men to new heights. Yet beneath this noble guise lay a deeper hunger, to experience the world not as guardians, but as participants. Celestial light shimmered around them, yet even that brilliance could not conceal the tension rising among the watchers. Some wavered, caught between loyalty and desire, while others, stirred by Semyaza's eloquence, felt their hesitation crumble. Azazel, whose mind was sharp and restless, stepped forward to support the cause. He spoke of fire and metallurgy, of secrets that could strengthen mankind and shape the world. One by one, the voices joined, forming a chorus of defiance that echoed through the heavens, like a gathering storm. What they planned was no small act of disobedience. It was the crossing of a divine boundary, a rebellion against the sacred separation between the immortal and the mortal. When the decision was sealed, Semyaza looked upon the multitude of his brothers and made them swear an oath, binding themselves to their purpose. Fear mingled with excitement as they vowed to stand united, so that none might later turn away. The heavens trembled at their unity, for it was not the harmony of worship, but the solidarity of rebellion. In that solemn moment, light itself seemed to dim around them, as if creation recoiled from their choice. Yet they descended, driven by passion and curiosity, falling like stars from the firmament, their radiance streaking through the night sky as they entered the realm of men. When their feet touched the earth, the world felt their arrival. Mountains quaked, the air thickened, and a strange awe filled the hearts of those who beheld them. They appeared not as monsters, but as beings of immense beauty, majestic forms clothed in splendor, their faces shining with celestial light. To humanity, they seemed divine, and the daughters of men looked upon them with wonder and admiration. The watchers walked among them, teaching, guiding, and revealing mysteries long hidden from mortal eyes. It was a time of marvels and whispers, a season when heaven's secrets began to mingle with the dust of the earth. The wisdom they shared was great, yet it was tainted by their pride. And Azazel taught men the crafting of weapons and the art of war, while others unveiled secrets of enchantments, astrology, and ornamentation. What was meant to be sacred became corrupted, used not for enlightenment, but for dominance. Humanity, once innocent and unguarded, began to change, adopting the ways of the fallen watchers who claimed to bring knowledge from above. The line between divine and human blurred, and the world's balance trembled under the weight of new understanding. Among the watchers, joy and sorrow mixed in equal measure. They reveled in their newfound connection with the earth, yet deep within their spirits a shadow lingered. Heaven's silence grew heavier with each passing day. The stars, which once shimmered with divine harmony, now seemed to burn with quiet judgment. Some among them began to feel the pangs of regret, but the bonds they had sworn would not allow retreat. They had crossed the boundary, and the consequences of that choice were now unfolding. Mankind, though blessed with newfound knowledge, began to drift from innocence. The hearts of men grew proud, and their eyes sought power rather than wisdom. The watchers watched as their teachings bore fruit of corruption, and the beauty that once drew them downward now became a mirror reflecting their fall. What was once an act of fascination had become a chain of bondage, linking their fates to the world they had sought to enlighten. Above them, heaven's silence was no longer a pause of mercy, but a gathering of judgment. The divine order, though patient, never forgets. The watchers had kindled a fire that would not be easily quenched, a fire that would spread through generations, altering creation itself. Yet, even as the heavens prepared their response, the fallen angels continued to dwell among men, unaware that their rebellion had only just begun. Upon the earth, The presence of the Watchers became a legend whispered among tribes and families. They walked among the people like gods, radiant and mysterious, and their influence spread swiftly through every land. The daughters of men, whose beauty had caught their gaze from afar, now stood before them in living form. The angels, though born of light, could no longer restrain the desire that burned within them. They took wives from among humankind, forming unions that heaven had forbidden since the dawn of creation. Those marriages were not blessed, for they broke the divine law that separated the mortal from the immortal. From these unions came children unlike any the world had known, giants in stature and power, called the Nephilim. They were creatures of mixed essence, carrying within them both angelic strength and human passion. At first, they were admired and revered. Their might seemed godlike, their intellect unmatched, and their beauty terrifying to behold. Yet what began as wonder soon became terror, for the Nephilim did not inherit the humility of man nor the obedience of angels. They grew restless, insatiable, and violent. The very earth trembled beneath their steps as they consumed its resources and turned upon its people. Cities rose in their honor, altars built for their names. Humanity, in awe of their power, began to worship them as deities, forgetting the Creator who had formed them from dust. The Watchers, once meant to protect mankind, became the fathers of corruption. Their sons ruled as tyrants, enslaving the weak and waging war upon each other for dominion. Blood filled the soil, and cries of despair reached the heavens. The light of divine order faded beneath a sky darkened by sin, and the harmony of creation was broken. The Watchers looked upon their offspring and felt both pride and dread. The Nephilim were reflections of their own rebellion, magnificent yet monstrous. Born of desire, but doomed by arrogance. Some of the Watchers tried to restrain their sons, but the corruption had already taken root. The earth could no longer bear their violence, and the cries of the oppressed rose like a storm before the throne of God. The beauty that once drew the Watchers downward had now become a mirror of their ruin. Azazel, whose pride was greatest among them, taught his sons the making of weapons and the art of conquest. Through his guidance, the Nephilim mastered the forging of metals, adorning themselves in armor that gleamed like the sun. They built empires that reached toward the heavens, mocking the divine with their monuments of pride. Yet no fortress, no blade, could shield them from the justice that was drawing near. For every act of creation they performed carried within it the seed of destruction. Women adorned themselves in ornaments and painted their faces with colors revealed by the Watchers. Men sought power in forbidden knowledge and turned to sorcery for dominion. The world had become intoxicated by the wisdom of the fallen, and innocence became a relic of the past. Even the elements seemed to mourn as storms gathered and the earth groaned under the weight of violence. Every river ran red, and the air was heavy with the cries of those who suffered beneath the Nephilim's rule. The hearts of the Watchers grew heavy with guilt, yet none dared face heaven's gaze. They knew the decree that awaited them, for every angel understood the cost of rebellion. Still, they clung to their earthly ties, unwilling to abandon the lives they had built. They had tasted the pleasures of flesh, the illusion of power, and the sweetness of freedom, but in those very gifts lay the poison of judgment. The boundary between heaven and earth had been shattered, and creation itself bore the scars of their disobedience. As night fell over the world, the Watchers stood upon the mountains they had once called home and gazed toward the heavens that no longer welcomed them. The stars above seemed dimmer, distant, as though mourning their fall. The whispers of angels who had remained loyal could be heard faintly in the winds, lamenting the fate of their brothers who had exchanged eternal light for fleeting desire. The rebellion that began as curiosity had become a curse, and its echoes would soon awaken heaven's righteous fury. Beneath the rule of the Nephilim, the world became a place of horror. The ground was soaked with blood, and the cries of the innocent pierced the heavens like endless lamentations. Humanity, once nurtured by divine care, now lived in fear of its own creations. The giants devoured the fruit of the earth and demanded offerings from those who served them. Villages burned as men were forced to sacrifice their own to appease beings that called themselves gods. The hearts of people turned cold, for the presence of evil was no longer hidden. It walked among them in plain sight. Mountains echoed with the roar of war. Rivers ran dry under the weight of the fallen's hunger. The Nephilim, insatiable and cruel, began to consume even flesh, turning upon mankind in their arrogance. The world trembled as their footsteps shook the land, and the voices of the oppressed rose as a plea to the heavens. The earth itself seemed alive with sorrow, groaning beneath the corruption that spread like a plague. The balance of creation had been lost, and the song of life that once filled the air was replaced by cries of anguish and despair. The watchers watched helplessly as the world they loved decayed under the rule of their children. They had once believed they could guide humanity to wisdom, but their teachings had sown destruction. Their knowledge, once sacred, had become a curse upon creation. Some among them wept, their tears falling upon the mountains like rain, but their remorse could not undo the damage. Heaven remained silent, though the silence itself felt like judgment. From the depths of the earth, the very soil began to reject the blood spilled upon it. Crops withered, beasts turned wild, and storms grew violent as if creation itself called out for deliverance. The cries of men mingled with the groans of the earth, forming a chorus of suffering that reached the throne of God. For a time, heaven waited, not in indifference, but in mercy, allowing the full measure of corruption to reveal itself before justice would descend. Yet the cries grew louder, and the patience of the divine drew thin. Among the people, stories began to spread of the Creator's sorrow. Some whispered that angels wept above the clouds, mourning both mankind and their fallen brethren. The sky seemed darker each day, and the stars appeared like distant eyes watching in grief. The righteous few who still honored the name of God lifted their voices in prayer, asking not for vengeance but for deliverance. They knew that only divine intervention could cleanse what had been defiled. The watchers, in their despair, turned to one another in secrecy. Some sought forgiveness, while others, hardened by pride, refused to repent. Zemyaza, their leader, knew the moment of reckoning was approaching. The signs were unmistakable. The earth itself was crying out for justice. Yet he could not undo the oath they had sworn, nor the blood their sons had spilled. What had been done could not be undone, and heaven's silence had become the shadow of judgment waiting to break forth. The Nephilim continued to ravage the land, and their power only grew. They built monuments reaching toward the heavens, as if to challenge the authority of the Creator. But every empire built on corruption carries within it the weight of its downfall. The earth began to shake beneath their arrogance, the seas churned, and lightning split the sky as nature rebelled against its tormentors. The harmony of creation, once perfect, now groaned under the burden of sin. Among the righteous, a single voice began to stand out, a man whose heart remained pure amid the corruption. His name was whispered among those who still believed, a symbol of hope that the Creator had not abandoned the world. Heaven was stirring, and justice, though delayed, was awakening. The cries of the earth had reached the highest throne, and soon the heavens would answer in power. High above the cries of the earth, beyond the veil of stars and the reach of mortal eyes, the celestial realm stirred. Silence, ancient and vast, filled the courts of heaven as the Creator summoned his host. Countless angels assembled, their radiance piercing the expanse, for a matter of grave weight was to be judged. The rebellion of the Watchers had not gone unnoticed, nor had the suffering of humanity escaped divine attention. From the highest throne came a decree, and the archangels, those who stood nearest to the eternal light, were called forth to bear witness to what must be done. Michael, the guardian of Israel and defender of divine order, stood with eyes burning like fire. Raphael, the healer of creation, radiated calm yet sorrowful resolve. Gabriel, messenger of truth, bore an expression of fierce determination, and Uriel, keeper of wisdom, held within his gaze the light of understanding that transcended all time. Together, they formed the Council of Judgment, appointed to execute the will of the Most High against their fallen brethren. They looked down upon the earth, beholding the ruin that the Watchers and their offspring had brought. Their hearts grieved, for once those beings had shared in their glory. Yet justice was not a choice. It was the very breath of divine order, and its hour had arrived. A voice thundered from the throne, majestic, pure, and unshaken. It spoke of the corruption that had spread like disease through creation, of the boundaries that had been broken, and of the suffering that now cried out from the depths of the world. The heavens trembled with the sound of that voice, for it carried not wrath alone but sorrow, the grief of a creator whose love had been defied. The command was clear. The Watchers were to be bound, their offspring destroyed, and the earth cleansed of their corruption. No word was wasted, for divine speech is action itself, and what was spoken would come to pass. Michael bowed his head, receiving the charge of battle. Raphael was instructed to heal the wounds inflicted upon creation, though the cure would come through destruction. Gabriel was sent to deliver warnings to the righteous, calling them to prepare for the flood that would soon wash over the world. Uriel was tasked with revealing hidden truths to the chosen, so that wisdom might endure beyond judgment. Each angel accepted his duty with solemn reverence, knowing that the mission ahead would bring sorrow even to heaven itself. Across the heavens, light began to shift as legions prepared for descent. The celestial hosts moved like living fire, an army of brilliance unseen by human eyes. They were not sent in anger alone, but in divine necessity, to restore balance where chaos reigned. As they gathered their strength, the memory of the Watchers' former glory lingered among them. Once they had stood side by side in praise, their voices joining in songs that filled eternity. Now those same voices would cry out in despair as justice drew near. Whispers filled the courts of heaven, not of gossip but of lamentation. Many angels mourned the loss of their brothers, for rebellion among immortals wounds even eternity. Yet no shadow of doubt touched the divine purpose. The balance of creation could not be compromised. The cry of the earth demanded answer, and the Creator, in his perfect righteousness, would answer it fully. The judgment was not vengeance, but restoration, a return to harmony between heaven and earth. As Michael prepared to descend, the light of his presence grew fierce. His armor shimmered like molten gold, his wings spread in brilliance that banished all darkness. With each step, the heavens trembled, and the Watchers below, though far removed, felt the weight of approaching judgment in their spirits. Raphael gathered his healing waters, Gabriel carried messages like thunder, and Uriel bore scrolls of divine mystery. The host stood ready, for the command of God had gone forth. When the last word was spoken, silence once again covered the celestial realm. The council dispersed, each archangel departing on his mission. Below, the world continued in turmoil, unaware that its fate had already been sealed in heaven's court. Yet above all this, divine order remained unshaken. The time of mercy had reached its limit, and justice, clothed in light, was preparing to descend upon the fallen and their corrupted offspring. From the heights of heaven, the archangels descended like storms of fire. The skies ignited as divine beings crossed the veil between realms, their radiance slicing through the darkness that had blanketed the world. The Watchers, once proud and radiant themselves, looked upward in terror. Their rebellion had been bold, but now the memory of their power faded beneath the majesty of heaven's armies. No weapon forged by their hands could defend them. No secret knowledge could save them from the judgment that now approached. Semyaza, their leader, gathered his fallen brethren upon Mount Hermon, where once they had sworn their oath of rebellion. He knew the sentence that awaited them. The heavens above grew dark, not in night, but in sorrow, as the archangels arrived, bearing the authority of the Most High. Michael's presence blazed before them like a living sun, and his voice rang with divine command. The watchers fell to their knees, their wings dimmed, their once bright forms now shadows of what they had been. They pleaded for mercy, but the decree of heaven could not be revoked. Michael pronounced judgment upon Semyaza and those who followed him. Their names would be erased from the book of the righteous, and their light extinguished until the appointed day of final reckoning. Raphael stepped forward, raising his hand over the earth, and the ground trembled. Deep fissures opened in the soil, revealing chasms of unimaginable depth. From within those abysses rose the smell of desolation, the air heavy with eternal shadow. The watchers were bound by chains not of metal but of divine essence, chains woven from light turned to darkness, unbreakable and eternal. Azazel, who had corrupted mankind with forbidden knowledge, was taken first. His chains glowed with searing brilliance as they wrapped around him, burning yet never consuming. Raphael cast him into a pit of darkness, where he would remain until the day of judgment. Semyaza followed, his cry echoing through creation as the angels of punishment carried him into the depths. One by one, the watchers were seized, their powers stripped away, their forms confined in the prisons prepared for them since before time began. The world shook as the earth closed above them, sealing them away from light. Those chains were not mere punishment but separation, the eternal severing of communion between the fallen and the divine. Cut off from heaven's radiance, the watchers languished in the shadows, aware of what they had lost. Their memories became torment, their own thoughts their accusers. They could still sense the distant vibration of heavenly praise, but it was forever beyond their reach. In the darkness, they remembered the songs they once sang, the light they once carried, and the love they had abandoned. Above them, the angels who remained faithful stood in silence. They did not rejoice in the fall of their brothers, for the sorrow of rebellion wounds even the righteous. Yet the will of God had been fulfilled, and the order of heaven restored. The Nephilim, the offspring of the fallen, would soon face their own end, for the cleansing of the world was not yet complete. Justice had begun its work, and creation would not rest until balance was restored. Chains of darkness symbolize more than confinement. They are the consequence of turning away from divine presence. For light, when rejected, becomes shadow, and glory, when twisted by pride, becomes anguish. The Watchers, once radiant beings of wisdom, had become prisoners of their own desires. Bound beneath the mountains, they could hear the distant rumble of waters gathering, the first signs of the flood that would soon wash over the earth. Above the imprisoned angels, humanity carried on, unaware that their guardians had fallen into eternal night. Yet in the unseen realm, heaven's will was unfolding with perfect precision. The cries of the earth had been answered, and now the waters of judgment were being prepared. The Watchers, chained and forgotten, could only wait in silence as the Creator's justice continued its work upon the face of the world. Skies darkened as clouds gathered from every horizon, thick and heavy with the weight of divine purpose. Winds howled through the valleys, and thunder rolled across the heavens like the voice of eternity itself. The time for cleansing had come. The Creator, in his righteousness, would not destroy without reason, nor act without mercy, yet the corruption upon the earth had reached its fullness. The cries of mankind, the groaning of creation, and the silence of the Watchers bound in darkness all converged in a single moment of reckoning. Waters began to rise, first as gentle rain, then as torrents unrelenting. Rivers overflowed, mountains shuddered, and oceans swelled beyond their borders. What had once been the laughter of storms became the cry of divine judgment. Yet amid the chaos stood one man, righteous and steadfast, whose heart remained pure in a generation of corruption. Noah, chosen by the Creator, had heeded the warnings given through divine messengers. For years he labored in obedience, building the ark that would carry life through the flood of renewal. As the first drops fell, people mocked him, blind to the meaning of his labor. But when the heavens opened and the deep released its fountains, their laughter turned to terror. Waters surged upward, swallowing cities and plains. The Nephilim, mighty and proud, tried to withstand the deluge, their roars echoing across the land as the waters consumed even them. Their strength could not save them. Their height could not reach the safety of the heavens they once defied. The world that had adored them now drowned in their presence. Inside the ark, Noah and his family waited as thunder split the sky. The flood was not merely destruction, it was purification. Each drop of rain carried judgment against sin and mercy for creation's renewal. Outside, the earth groaned as mountains disappeared beneath waves, and every living thing that drew breath perished. Yet the ark floated safely, guided by unseen hands, a vessel of promise amid the sea of divine wrath. Heaven watched in silence as the waters fulfilled their purpose. The cries of the wicked faded beneath the roar of the flood, and the voices of the Nephilim were silenced forever. Beneath the depths, the spirits of those fallen giants would wander without rest, disembodied and aimless, their power broken, their purpose lost. Above, the clouds wept for 40 days and nights, as if creation itself mourned the price of corruption. When the rains ceased, the world lay still. The once mighty cities were gone, the mountains reshaped, and the earth washed clean. From the ark emerged life renewed, fragile yet faithful, stepping upon a land reborn. The covenant between God and mankind would soon be sealed, a promise that never again would the waters rise to destroy all flesh. The rainbow, arched across the sky, became a symbol of mercy triumphing over wrath, a divine reminder that even judgment serves the purpose of love. Beneath the ground, the watchers remained bound, their ears filled with the distant echo of rushing water. They could sense the cleansing above, but would never again behold its light. Their rebellion had birthed destruction, and the flood had swept away every trace of their legacy. Yet their story was not over, for their sin would continue to echo through the ages, shaping the unseen struggle between light and darkness in the hearts of men. As the sun broke through the clouds, casting golden light upon the new world, a silence settled over creation. It was not the stillness of death, but the breath before renewal. The flood had passed, the chains remained unbroken beneath the earth, and humanity stood once again under heaven's gaze. Justice had been carried out, but the memory of rebellion would not fade, for even in renewal, the scars of the past remind creation of its dependence on divine order. When the floodwaters receded and the earth began to breathe again, the world was silent for a time. Every mountain gleamed under the touch of the sun, and valleys that had been drowned now carried streams of fresh life. The air was pure, untainted by the cries of violence that once filled it. Yet beneath that calm, something unseen stirred. The Nephilim, though their bodies had perished in the flood, had not been erased entirely. Their spirits, born of angelic and human essence, were not bound like their fathers, for they belonged to neither heaven nor earth. They were wanderers, disembodied and restless, stripped of form but not of will. These were the spirits that would come to haunt the generations of men. Invisible to mortal eyes, these beings drifted through the new world, bound by hunger that could never be satisfied. They remembered the strength of their bodies, the power they once wielded, the worship they once received, yet all of it had been taken from them. Cast adrift, they sought to inhabit what they had lost, to once again touch the realm of flesh, to feel through mortal senses. They lingered in the shadows of men, whispering into thoughts, drawing the weak toward violence, lust, and pride. What had begun as angelic rebellion now continued as spiritual corruption. The flood had cleansed the earth of bodies, but not of influence. Each spirit carried the memory of its father's defiance and the fury of its own extinction. Denied rest, they clung to the remnants of the physical world. They roamed the desolate lands, searching for hosts through whom they might once again experience life. In dreams and temptations, they reached into human hearts, seeking to shape them in their image. Fear entered the soul of mankind once more, though the heavens had promised peace. What could be seen as mere shadow or madness often bore the touch of these lost spirits. As the generations after Noah multiplied, the presence of these entities grew subtle yet persistent. People began to sense unseen forces moving around them, whispers that drove men to rage, desires that grew beyond control, fears that deepened into despair. Some turned to idols and false gods, unaware that they were feeding the very spirits that had once enslaved the world before the flood. These wandering souls, deprived of light, found power in deception. By taking on the mask of divinity, they enticed humanity back toward the same rebellion their fathers had begun. No city was free from their touch. In temples raised to unknown gods, in rituals meant to honor the earth, they fed upon devotion misdirected. Humanity believed they sought the divine, yet in truth they communed with the remnants of fallen power. The Nephilim spirits learned to survive through worship, drawing strength from the offerings of mankind. Even the wise began to stumble, for evil does not always appear in the form of terror. It often cloaks itself in beauty and promise. Those who listened to the voice of heaven knew the truth. Prophets spoke of unclean spirits that sought rest and found none, that wandered through dry places seeking bodies to inhabit. They warned that these forces were not myths but echoes of a rebellion long past. Humanity had been given dominion over the earth, but with dominion came the need for vigilance. For as long as these spirits roamed, the battle for the human heart would never cease. From the unseen realm, they plotted to reclaim what was lost. Every generation brought new opportunities, wars, greed, idolatry, each opening a door for them to whisper again. Their greatest weapon was deception, for they could not create but only corrupt. Where love existed, they sowed lust. Where peace flourished, they planted division. Their goal was not conquest of the body, but enslavement of the soul. Though unseen, they remained the lingering echo of the ancient Watcher's rebellion, proof that evil, once born, cannot simply vanish. It must be overcome by truth. Some say they still wander to this day, hidden in the corners of the world, shaping thoughts and bending desires. Their hunger remains, for they are spirits without home, beings of exile longing for what they destroyed. The flood may have washed away the flesh of their fathers, but their legacy persists like a shadow beneath the sun. Humanity, though renewed, continues to stand between two realms, one calling toward light, the other whispering from darkness. The war that began with the Watchers continues within every heart that chooses between obedience and pride. Far beyond the passage of mortal time, across centuries of silence and the rise of countless generations, the destiny of the fallen remains unfinished. Though bound in the depths, the Watchers have not escaped the memory of heaven. Every act of rebellion awaits its appointed hour of reckoning, and every spirit that defied the Creator will one day face the fullness of divine justice. Prophets and apostles, inspired by the Spirit of truth, spoke of this coming day, a day when the abyss will open and the sentence once declared in heaven will be completed upon the fallen and their offspring. Through sacred writings, the future unfolds like a vision of fire. The Book of Enoch speaks of the Watchers' eternal chains, of their cries from the pit where light does not reach. They plead for mercy, yet none is granted, For their judgment was sealed when they chose to forsake heaven for desire. Scripture echoes their fate in the words of Peter and Jude, describing angels who sinned and were cast into gloomy dungeons, kept for the day of final judgment. That day, still awaiting its hour, will unveil the complete restoration of divine order. From the depths of the earth, where they lie bound, the fallen sense the stirring of prophecy drawing near. Time, though endless to mortals, is but a breath in eternity. Every whisper of rebellion upon the earth reminds them that their legacy continues, yet also hastens their final doom. When the appointed moment arrives, their chains will not be broken for freedom but for trial, as the abyss is opened to display their guilt before all creation. What was hidden will be revealed, and every act of deceit will be exposed before the light of truth. As the Book of Revelation describes, the abyss will one day open, and a great darkness will rise, releasing ancient spirits bound since the dawn of corruption. Their release will not be victory, but fulfillment of prophecy, a final act before eternal confinement. The fallen will seek to wage war once more, but their strength will crumble before the glory of divine presence. The same light that once gave them life will now be their undoing. For no power of rebellion can stand against the holiness of God. Those who remain upon the earth during that time will witness the clash between eternal righteousness and the remnants of evil's pride. The heavens will shake, stars will fall, and the voice of the Almighty will resound through all creation. The watchers, their followers, and the spirits of their offspring will be brought before the great throne, not as rulers, but as prisoners. The lake of fire, reserved for the fallen and their master, will receive them, not as punishment alone, but as the final act of purification for the cosmos. Every angel who remained faithful will stand as witness, for divine justice is not vengeance, but truth made visible. The rebellion that began with longing for the mortal world will find its conclusion in eternal separation from all that is good. The fallen will see what they abandoned, light, harmony, and love, and know that they cannot return. Their lament will fill the void, but it will not alter the decree. What God ordains is eternal, and his righteousness endures beyond time itself. Humanity will also face judgment, for the influence of the watchers did not end with their fall. Every heart touched by their deceit will be weighed, and every soul will stand in the light of truth. Yet for those who remain faithful, who walk in humility and seek the will of the Creator, the judgment will not bring fear, but renewal. The final act of justice will cleanse creation entirely, leaving no trace of rebellion, no whisper of darkness to disturb the perfection of divine order. Prophecy speaks of this day not to inspire terror, but to awaken remembrance. The story of the Watchers is not only the tale of angels who fell, but of the enduring conflict between pride and obedience, desire and holiness. The chains that hold them are reminders of the boundaries that preserve harmony in creation. When the final trumpet sounds and the heavens open in glory, every eye will see that justice was never delayed. It was merely waiting for the perfect moment when all creation would understand that every act of rebellion, no matter how powerful, must bow before the eternal throne. When the last echoes of rebellion fade and the final judgment is fulfilled, creation will enter a silence unlike any before, a silence not of fear or desolation, but of peace. The heavens will shine with renewed radiance, their light untainted by pride or shadow. Every wound inflicted upon the fabric of creation will be healed, every trace of corruption erased. What was once divided will be made whole again. Angels will sing once more in harmony, their voices blending into an eternal chorus of gratitude for the justice and mercy that have restored all things. From the depths of the cosmos, light will rise, filling even the spaces where darkness once reigned. The prisons of the fallen will remain sealed, but their influence will be no more. The chains that held them will become symbols of victory, reminders of a justice that never faltered. The earth, renewed by divine fire and purified by truth, will shine with the beauty of its first creation. No sorrow will linger, no pain will persist, for the presence of the Almighty will dwell among His creation once again. The heavens will no longer be distant from the world below. The boundary between divine and mortal will be restored, not in separation, but in perfect communion. Humanity will no longer look upward in fear, but in awe and unity. Those who remained faithful through the ages, who held to the light even in times of shadow, will stand among the redeemed as witnesses to God's unchanging love. The fallen angels will be no more than a memory, their rebellion a lesson written into eternity, a testimony that nothing stands forever against divine order. Every realm will reflect harmony as it was meant to be. The stars will burn with pure brilliance, no longer symbols of war, but of worship. The voices of the righteous will rise like incense, joining the songs of seraphim and cherubim. The Creator's glory will fill every corner of existence, leaving no shadow, no unhealed scar. The watchers, once radiant and proud, will be remembered not for their fall, but for how their defiance revealed the unshakable righteousness of God. Their story will forever testify to the truth that divine wisdom cannot be undone by rebellion, and that even sin becomes a vessel through which holiness is magnified. Humanity, restored to its rightful place, will walk in unbroken fellowship with its Creator. Knowledge will no longer lead to pride, but to understanding. Power will no longer corrupt, but serve love. The earth will flourish with life unending, untouched by decay or violence. Rivers will sing again, mountains will dance in light, and every living thing will rejoice in the beauty of divine restoration. It will be a world without tears, where the memory of suffering is replaced by the presence of eternal joy. From the throne of heaven, light will pour forth like a river of gold, reaching every heart and every corner of creation. What was once distant will be near. What was once feared will be embraced. The glory that once dwelled in the highest realms will now reside among the redeemed, and God's love will be the heartbeat of all existence. The harmony broken by the Watcher's rebellion will at last be restored in a perfection greater than before, for out of ruin has come renewal, and from judgment has risen eternal peace. Across the heavens, the song of creation will rise, proclaiming that good has triumphed over evil, and light has conquered darkness forever. The Watchers fall. The Nephilim's destruction and the long history of mankind's struggle will all be woven into a single tapestry of divine wisdom. Every question will find its answer, every mystery its meaning. The Creator's plan, once hidden from mortal eyes, will stand revealed in its fullness, majestic, merciful, and complete. When the final note of that song resounds, the heavens and earth will breathe as one. Time will cease to divide past from future, and eternity will become a living present. The story that began with rebellion will close with redemption, and all creation will rest in the perfect peace of divine unity. The Watcher's judgment will no longer echo in sorrow, but in triumph, for their fall has become the foundation upon which eternal order stands unshaken. If this story moved your heart or opened your understanding, let its message live beyond this moment. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss what comes next. Give this video a like to help share it with others. And write in the comments what touched you most or what you reflected upon while listening. Share this film with your friends and family so they too may know the story of the Watchers, the justice of heaven, and the hope that awaits all creation. Let the message spread, for every voice that carries truth helps light the world a little more.